When I first moved into the Maplewood Estates development just outside of Denver, I thought I had finally found the quiet, suburban corner of life I had been working toward. The manicured lawns seemed endless. The houses looked like they were copy-pasted from a real estate catalog, and the neighbors waved politely while jogging with their golden retrievers. It was the kind of neighborhood where the local grocery store played soft jazz in the background, and everyone seemed proud that their mailboxes matched in color and design. But if I am being fully honest, the real crown jewel of my move was not the new house. It was my car. A custom midnight blue Aston Martin I had worked years to afford. That car was more than glossy metal and horsepower. It was my small monument to every sleepless night, every double shift, and every sacrifice I had made to get there. Strictly speaking, I treated it like a pet or even a fragile piece of art. I never sped in the subdivision. I never let it idle too long. I handled it with respect because that machine was not just transportation, it was therapy on wheels. What I never could have foreseen was that simply owning that car would light a fuse under someone. Her name was Karen. She lived 3 doors down in a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and a flag hung on every holiday. Even the obscure ones. At first glance, you would think she was just another cookie-cutter suburban mom, maybe overly enthusiastic about mulch sales or pumpkin spice everything. But Karen was no ordinary neighbor. She was president of the Homeowners Association, and she carried that role like it had been handed to her from on high. She was the kind of person who measured grass blades to make sure they did not exceed 3 inches, who threatened fines if your trash bins were visible for even a moment past collection day. And the day she noticed my car, her expression soured as though I had driven a tank into the neighborhood playground. The first shot across the bow came in the form of a letter casually tucked under my windshield wiper. Not the polite welcome neighbor note you would expect. This was pure venom on line stationery. "Your car threatens the harmony of our neighborhood," she wrote. "It is a reckless, intimidating thing, and it frightens the children. You must remove it within 14 days, or further measures will be taken." I laughed, smiled even. Surely this was an overreaction. My car was not loud. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't disturbing anyone. It was cleaner and more courteous than half the SUVs that thundered down the main road at 40 miles an hour. For comparison, Karen herself often barreled home in her oversized Cadillac Escalade, barking at joggers to stay out of the road while she swerved one-handed, distracted by her phone. But none of that mattered. She had picked her enemy. And in her mind, the Aston Martin was a menace. Still, I thought it would blow over. I even snapped a photo of the letter, dropped it into my folder of neighborhood oddities I jokingly called The Chronicles of Karen, and moved on. That folder had screenshots of her confusing Facebook rants about noise ordinances, plus a gem of her once demanding that Halloween decorations be removed before October 15th because they were occult in nature. The car note was just going to be another chapter in that digital scrapbook. But I was wrong. This was not going to fade away. Karen was not someone who made idle threats. She was plotting her move like a general marshalling forces for battle. 15 days later, I walked out the front door on a soft gray Saturday morning with coffee in hand. The air smelled of pine and freshly cut lawns. For a few bewildering seconds, everything seemed perfectly ordinary until my eyes found the driveway. The sight punched the breath out of me. My car, my pride, my escape, it was annihilated. The windshield was a spider web of shattered glass. The tires were limp, sliced through ruthlessly. The deep metallic paint had been carved away, down to vicious raw scratches. The hood itself bore the dents of repeated, deliberate strikes. This wasn't vandalism. It was an execution. For a moment, I could only stand there, cup in hand, heart pounding like war drums inside my chest. It felt almost cinematic, the quiet of the street at odds with the horror in front of me. And then a voice broke the silence. "Denise?" The neighbor across the cul-de-sac. crept up nervously, clutching a cardigan around her thin shoulders. Her eyes darted left and right before she whispered, I saw Karen with the long guy last night near your driveway. They were carrying something. Hammers. I think. I thought it was strange. Strange. Strange was a raccoon tipping over garbage cans. What I was facing here was madness, and Strange did not begin to cover it. Denise's timid honesty was both infuriating and oddly validating. I knew, deep down, who had done this. Only Karen had that much venom pointed squarely at me. But while anger swirled in my chest, something else sparked brighter, calm purpose. Anger burns out quickly. Strategy lasts. I walked inside, coffee still in hand, and opened the hidden app for my porch light security system. Because yes, unlike Karen, I believed in receipts. And there she was. On grainy but undeniable video, Karen in her housecoat, screaming at shadows as she swung a hammer down onto my car like she was in some twisted reality show of Home Improvement Anarchy Edition. By her side was the landscaper, watching helplessly as though he were dragged into a crime he had no stomach for. She spat out phrases about threats and protecting the children of Maplewood Estates as though she were leading a crusade. That footage was everything I needed. Evidence clear as day. I didn't shout. I didn't collapse on the curb in grief as she might have hoped. Instead, I smiled, because now, Karen had no idea she had just delivered me the golden ticket. She thought she had rid the neighborhood of her personal villain. But instead, she had just written her own downfall in high definition. And I made my next move carefully. I picked up my phone, dialed my lawyer, and with a steady voice said, "We're going to make her regret every swing of that hammer." Underscore. The police's reaction said it all. The officer reviewing my porch light footage shook his head slowly, muttering. She didn't even hide her face. No gloves. No mask. Just Karen, in a floral robe, wielding a hammer like it was gardening equipment. He looked half embarrassed for her, half amused. He filed the report on the spot. Within a week, Karen had a police officer knocking on her spotless white door. Of course, she greeted him not with humility, but with performance. She claimed victimhood, argued that my car was a dangerous missile, and declared she was simply protecting the community. In her twisted narrative, smashing my car was an act of service like pulling weeds or painting fences. The audacity would have been laughable if my losses weren't so real. Meanwhile, the Homeowners Association scrambled to contain the fallout. They issued a bland apology letter that conspicuously lacked Karen's signature. Karen, instead of backing down, doubled down. At the next board meeting, she unleashed a speech about luxury cars corrupting family values, about speed being a silent killer, about community safety requiring sacrifice. Most neighbors simply glanced at their phones until the tirade ended. But she wasn't through. She began sending out mass emails smearing me as a reckless driver, labeling me Fast and the Furious wannabe, unembarrassment, and even my personal favorite, an adult child who worships horsepower instead of family. My lawyer collected every single one, printed them out on glossy pages, and organized them into binders like trophies. By the time we moved toward civil litigation, our case was airtight. We had property destruction. We had written defamation. We had trespassing on video. We had harassment through emails. And, cherry on top, we had Denise timid, cardigan clutching, Denise willing to testify she saw Karen with hammer in hand. My attorney nearly salivated at the details. For Karen, the trial would not be a defense. It would be an autopsy, showing her guilt under bright courtroom lights. The day of court arrived crisp and clear, like the universe wanted maximum clarity for her downfall. Karen strode in with shoulders squared and nose tilted up. armed with nothing more than a battered clipboard and stacks of fuzzy photos of my illegally parked car. I, meanwhile, arrived calm, collected. Carrying nothing more than a glass of courtroom water I drank as if it were the richest champagne on earth. Her face said confidence. My heart whispered inevitability. Underscore. The show began with my lawyer's slideshow. The very first image projected on the court screen was glorious Karen mid-swing. Hammer high, face twisted, hair flying, bathrobe belt askew. She looked less like a neighborhood guardian and more like a villain ripped straight out of a fever dream. The gallery chuckled in disbelief. The judge raised one eyebrow and forced composure. But even he could not hide the exasperation. Karen coughed loudly, pretended indignation, shouted objection as though the word itself might erase the video playing only feet away. The judge, with a sigh that carried the weight of centuries, answered dryly, "Ma'am, that's you." Then came the email collection, each one more bizarre than the last. Pages upon pages of rants, all decorated in bold fonts and exclamation points. Danger to society. My sworn duty as HOA president is to stop him. Community under siege. With every page my lawyer displayed, Karen's complexion deepened from pink to crimson. She yelled things like, "This is out of context," to which the judge responded each time with measured patience. "Ma'am, you wrote these." The court reporter's fingers actually paused once, as though even she could not believe the nonsense pouring out of Karen's mouth. When it was Karen's turn, she leaned on her favorite shield children. She declared my car was an irresistible temptation to speed, that it glorified recklessness, and that her act of destruction was actually prevention of tragedy. The judge asked slowly, "So you admit you destroyed the vehicle, Karen?" With alarming confidence. Answered, "I neutralized it." Neutralized as though she had disarmed a bomb instead of terrorizing someone's property. A silence heavier than stone weighed down the courtroom. Everyone present shifted uncomfortably. The absurdity impossible to ignore. Then came my chance. I brought evidence. Noise logs showing my car never exceeded standard levels within the neighborhood. GPS data proving I never drove faster than 20 miles per hour within community boundaries. Testimonies from neighbors, except of course her loyal fringe followers who confirmed they had never heard so much as a squeal from my tires. Piece by piece, we dismantled the caricature Karen painted of me until only the truth glowed in the open. I was no menace. I was a neighbor living quietly, carefully, while the supposed defender of peace had declared war on fantasy. Underscore, the judge exhaled. Deeply, slowly. His words came like the axe of finality. The evidence is overwhelming. Karen, you are guilty of harassment, trespassing, property destruction, and liable for full damages, fees, and fines. Silence in the room cracked open like glass under weight. Karen's jaw dropped, her face finally stripped of arrogance, eyes darting in disbelief. She whispered a strained, "Wait." What, like a child denied candy? But there was no reprieve. The ruling was final. She would pay the price of her temper tantrum. Replacing the Aston Martin, factoring in customization, damages, legal costs, and the fine, would bleed Karen dry just over $300,000. Her beloved Escalade went up for sale within weeks. Rumor had it a second mortgage followed. Neighbors gossiped in hushed tones about screaming arguments behind Karen's perfect curtains. Her landscaper refused to return. Her husband quit the board. Even her pampered poodle, stressed by the chaos, lost patches of fur. Karma's comedy routine had begun. My new car arrived 2 weeks later. The same midnight blue Aston Martin, custom calipers painted a blazing crimson, and embroidered across the headrests in sly red letters, "Thank you, Karen." It was subtle, but potent, the kind of message that required no words, yet shouted louder than any courtroom speech ever could. I made sure to drive it gently, precisely 10 miles an hour down the street, savoring the irony as Karen tended to her roses, watering them with a frozen stare that could curdle milk. I played a jaunty tune over the speakers and waved with a smile that almost hurt my face. She had lost. And she knew that every time she saw me behind the wheel. At the next homeowners meeting, Karen squirmed in her chair, still clinging to excuses. She claimed she acted in good faith, that the court was biased against safety advocates, but nobody bought it. Not after the emails, not after the videos, and not after the judge's ruling. Denise, of all people, brought popcorn to that meeting like it was movie night. By unanimous vote, Karen was stripped of her presidency. Some even whispered she should be banned from the neighborhood entirely for the very disruption of peace she had falsely accused me of. As for me, I installed more cameras. Not because I feared another attack, Karen could barely make eye contact with me anymore, but because I decided to turn the garage into a shrine of sorts, framed copies of her first hateful letter, stills of her mid-hammer swing, and the court receipt that glimmered proof of my win. I sit in the driver's seat sometimes, run my hands over the stitched words, "Thank you, Karen," and smile. Not because I won a car, but because the whole neighborhood learned a lesson written clearer than daylight. A fancy title like Homeowners Association President does not make you judge, jury, and executioner. If you cross the line between rules and obsession, if you destroy instead of protect, you just might lose everything over a grudge against a gear shift.